That's a tough call.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, Andrew Schulze had me start the Student Lutheran Human Relations Group, because he knew me from here in New York, where I was a charter member of the New York one. And I talked to him about it. And he knew her because she had been in his congregation. He said she should never have been accepted. So he talked to
Should have never been accepted.
to our program.
Oh, you're not talking Jerry, you're talking about
No,
that other girl.
the other
All right. Mm-hmm.
And he said she should never have been accepted.
Yeah.
And he talked to Krentz and they sent her home.
Okay.
But Jerry came the next semester. Now, this other gal was a little lighter.
Mm-hmm.
But with Jerry, we could not let Jerry go downtown alone.
Mm-hmm.
If Jerry needed to go downtown to go shopping, like even to the drugstore, one of us went with her. And that was Valpo at that time.
Wow.
And it was rough. You know, it's still not that great. I mean, it's still not that great. But it was at one time the capital for the Ku Klux Klan. So, you know, what do you expect?
Yep, that runs deep.
And no, not good, not healthy. But fascinating.
Yes.
No, I agree with you that Valpo was a cultural shock.
And I think a good one for me because it helped me recognize that not everybody grew up the same way that I did or had the same assumptions that I did.
I'll have to tell you a funny
It really kind of
funny
opened up
story.
my eyes.
And in the middle, you know, in the middle seat of the year, Irma Flieger, one of my classmates, graduated and was sent to Malvern, where Becky is now.
Okay, that's on Long
She
Island.
was there. And Mary Youngerman says to her, well, you better take a good look at the trees, because you're never going to see another tree now that you're going out to the east. You know, and I'm sitting there, and I just looked at her, and I said, Mary, how are the 12 people you left behind in South Dakota?
Oh. Cultural differences. Gotta love community.
Oh,
Nah.
I mean, we just, she looked at me, and we all burst out laughing, you know. But I assured her there were a few trees on Long Island.
Yeah.
Had a couple of them were in Island Camp in Henning, Minnesota, which is off nowhere. You had to fly into Minneapolis, and then we had to arrange carpools to get out to the camp. The camps were bunk beds, and I'm talking about hammock-style bunk beds. You know, you'd get in the bunk bed, like this. I don't want to tell you how many mosquitoes we had there one year. It was the week before they sprayed for mosquitoes. And Minnesota has mosquitoes that are about that big.
So, do you think adapting to the needs of the community happened because people in the community spoke out, or was it just
Yes.
as we were aging, or, I mean...
I would say that it was a question of speaking out, talking about special needs. In other words, they could be physical handicap needs, some of them were dietary. Certainly someone like Donna, who helped us recognize what we had to do for people who had sight issues. People like, I just lost her name, California,
Patty.
who has hearing issues. All of those things were both the sensitivity of sometimes a small group around that person, but also that person's willingness to speak out. Now, Jamie was one of the people who was the most handicapped earliest.
Okay. Okay.
Now, Jamie doesn't not speak out, as you well know. I mean, if Jamie's got to say something, she's going to say it. And clearly, she was one of the people who made the comments about handicapped. And there were some of us who were right behind her because we were also beginning to have difficulties. And I keep saying to people, and I think people have gotten the message, that handicapped accessible, if someone just says it to you, doesn't necessarily mean it is. And a perfect example, and I've used this one, is that a hotel will tell you, oh yes, our bathrooms are accessible. And what it means is that they have a tub and a couple of handrails. I cannot get into a tub. There is no way I can get my feet up over the tub at Reg.
Sure.
And when we were in Cleveland, they were supposed to give me a walk-in, and the first night they gave me a regular room. And I went to step into the tub and I went down on the floor.
No.
And that was an interesting thing. My room got changed very quickly.
Was this the most recent time we
Yeah.
were in Cleveland? Okay.
Fortunately, I had gone, we were a day early, and I had gone with Brenda Bauer. Brenda had a daughter living just 2 towns down. And so she emailed me and said, can I ride out to conference with you? I said, I'd love to have you ride with me.
Oh, Brenda Bauer's daughter lives 2 towns from here.
Yeah, just
Okay.
down below here.
She's a Minnesota deaconess who's also a nurse.
North Dakota.
North Dakota, sorry.
And she and I drove out, and we got there the day before. And I was going to take the shower. She was in the pool. And I had to wait for her to come back because here I am on the floor.
Yeah.
I can't get up. Now, fortunately, I mean, I've got no clothes on, right? She handed me a long T-shirt. They called the EMTs, and the EMTs got me up on my feet. And once I was up on my feet, I was fine.
Yeah.
Oh, the hotel, boy, I'll tell you, I got a personal visit. I got 2 phone calls. And, the second phone call, I finally said to the woman who was calling, I said, you don't have to worry, I am not planning to sue you. And I could almost hear her go, phew.
Yeah.
But they had promised me a step-in shower,
Yeah.
and they didn't have it. And, you were thinking, I thought, well, I'll make it. And what I had done was had the mat on the floor, and my foot was on that mat, and I didn't realize it.
And then it slipped. I'm glad you're okay.
But, so we need to think, those are the things that I think people have become more aware of. They've become more aware of the fact that one step into a doorway can be inaccessible. Although one step is better than 2. Because one step I can put the walker up and use it to step up. But if you give me 2 steps, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing I think that has gone on. I think almost every issue in our community where we have made changes to accommodate people have been made because someone was willing to stand up and speak, and other people then, went behind them and said yes. I think even justice issues have been like that. Issues, for instance, and I would probably use that one, the very fact that we have women celebrants for communion. The first time that was to happen was for Candace Pitcock's consecration at Valpo. And Norma was to be the pastor. The night before, and it was a big mistake, the president, the then president, which was Evelyn, allowed the group to vote. Even though that she had been invited, everything had been done, set up. And there were enough of our very conservative women still in the group. They hadn't left yet. They've all left. Voted no. And so Norma was uninvited Saturday night.
So when you say the group, the entire community voted? And was Norma a part of that piece too?
Yeah.
Okay.
We all were. If it had not been Candace Pidcock's consecration, there would have been a protest service out on the lawn. I can tell you that right now. This was all happening in Deaconess Hall in the chapel.
Okay. Is that where the communion was held?
Yeah.
Communion services were, okay.
But we would have had a meeting, we would have had a service outside. But Candace was in the Northeast. Norma was in the Northeast, she was up in New Haven at the time. And we were all to lay on hands. You know, so all of that was involved.
Yeah.
Appreciating your diligent efforts on behalf of the Deaconess program, especially in view of the present synodical review of the program, and that was what was going on, and affirming the program and ministry in which we have received our training and in which we are now serving, would recommend the following items for your consideration and action. 1. In view of the emphasis on education today, to keep abreast of the rapid changes in our world, that graduate work be encouraged for the professional and educational growth. And I did a paper on why I thought that it was important to have a deaconess on staff. I mean, I really wanted a deaconess as the executive, but I felt how important it was to have a deaconess on staff, because we were dealing with women, we were dealing with women's issues, we were dealing with women's ministry. Palisades for annual meeting that year, the year of the Missouri War, the year of the Anaheim Convention. We knew what was coming. The Missouri Synod, it just split. It hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what happened. The split in Missouri created a variety of difficulties. And we then, and it was right after this, by the way, that we had that whole issue with Norma and celebrating. The very conservative deaconesses were still a part of our diaconate, one of whom was a classmate of mine. And she hadn't been to conference in 20 years, maybe 25. She comes to conference, and she looks at me, and she said, "This isn't the diaconate I was consecrated into." And I said, "No, Betty, we've grown." That's the only way I could put it. She was still back where she'd been. We began to realize in our diaconate that there could be some difficulties for some of our deaconesses. They could lose a job because they were more lenient or liberal than the church they were in. It never happened, by the way, in any levels of great numbers. But we proposed at that meeting that we establish a contingency fund. And the contingency fund was to be funded by ourselves, in other words, we were going to put money into it, to make available small sums of money to maybe tide someone over with food, etc. We also agreed that we would list, those of us that had space would list the fact that we were willing to take someone in. In other words, that was about what we could manage. And so that contingency fund was built. It was never used. And it's what became the scholarship fund. Now, it was used to bring people to conference before it was the scholarship fund. It became the scholarship fund when we incorporated, because the lawyers said, you need to use the term scholarship fund, contingency fund has no meaning. And so it got changed to scholarship. But again, I think that is such an example of how we saw ourselves caring for each other and doing what was necessary to make sure that everybody was helped and everybody had what they needed. It was fascinating when you think about the growth, think about the changes. For things like the role of women in society, and also in the church. And the war years, when the women literally took over in the Second World War, you know, the famous Rosie the Riveter.
That's right.
And then once you got them off the farm, you can't send them back. So you get the post-war years where you begin to see more and more women getting higher education. And then one of the things that I've got a subtle undercurrent on here is that we began to include in our worship hymns by women, which hadn't been there before. It wasn't until the 50s that you got devotions being done by deaconesses.
It was all done by men before that.
Yep. Wouldn't sit through our meetings and such, and they'd go off and do things. And one year they went and found a t-shirt shop. And they had t-shirts done up. They were yellow t-shirts. And on the front, it said Deaconess Auxiliary. And on the back, it said, "It's okay with me, but ask my wife."
Yeah.
And we absolutely howled. For years, the Deaconess Auxiliary used to make a report at one of our business meetings. They would get up and they would tell us, you know, the kind of things they were doing. But they'd also sometimes comment on what they saw in the group. They were very supportive of some of the changes that we were making. And as I said, there was a year or two where I stuck my neck out and, you know, people just weren't being supportive, and these guys would say, "Just keep on at it, Hertha, keep on at it." And their support made a big difference. The LDC originally had one token woman on it, the LDA board. And that was a woman who represented what was then called the Deaconess, they were called the Deaconess Auxiliaries.
Auxiliary, right.
And they were groups of women that would have fundraisers for us, largely in Fort Wayne. And one of those people usually was appointed to the board. And when I knew that those people, it was a woman named Pauline Krudoff. But there were no deaconesses. There was no input from deaconesses. And from what I can see of the history, in '33, there was an advisory committee of the LDC, but they had no power. And the only thing we were able to do was suggest things through resolution. But it continued to be very paternal until the reorganization that occurred. And that reorganization really occurred when there were ELCA deaconesses, Missouri deaconesses, in other words, when the whole mishmash began of varieties of deaconess, of Lutheran churches.
So when we became pan-Lutheran.
Right.
Okay.
And that whole thing, because then we got representatives on the board from each group, and you know, there was that kind of thing. And at that point, we said, let's also get deaconesses on the board.
Okay, so that's when the LDC, okay.
And that's when we then began. The first input we really had was when the president of the LDC was invited to have voice and no vote on the board. And that was back probably in the 60s. It was Jean Hoover Schneider, who was president at the time, and she was the first to have a voice but no vote. And then a little later, they finally decided that they'd give the president a voice and vote. But I can't give you a year on
Okay.
that. That's at least a history, and I'm not always sure of that.
Okay.
The other thing, you were asking me about integration earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Just so I can give you this whole list. I didn't even realize I had it. Jerry Plato was consecrated in '58.
Okay. First African American in our community to be consecrated.
Right. And we accepted people, but we weren't necessarily going out there recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
In this order that I've got it is this direct. These are the African Americans.
Okay.
74, Stella Brown Caney. 79, Maggie Harris.
Okay.
81, Phyllis Baltimore Harvey. 83, Karen Westbrooks.
Mm-hmm.
89, Addie Wilkins. 93, Gladys Gilmore, and then you'll have to go look beyond that.
89 was Addie.
I have to tell you a really funny story that has to do with Jerry Plato, Jan Roleski, and Nobuko Suzuki. We had conference here in New York, and it was '72. We borrowed station wagons from Bronxville to tour New York City. And I had one of them, and I was driving it. And it was one of those station wagons where the back seat faced the back.
Mm-hmm.
An old Chevy, I think they were. Now, first of all, we were driving down, I think it was down 3rd Avenue or 1st or 3rd, and they were singing, and all of a sudden one cab driver pulls up alongside of us and he starts conducting. But every time, in the back seat was sitting Jan, Jerry, and Nobuko. And every time a car came too close, one of them went like this, one went like this, and one went like this. They had everybody on the street in stitches. They were the three, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil.
Funny. Oh, wish there was a picture of that.
Yeah, too bad we
Great to
don't.
see.
But, and I don't know if Jerry or I haven't talked to Jerry and Jan about that one for a long time. I don't know if how much they remember that, but I remember the three of them back there. I'm just looking to see what's in here that might. Here's another piece that you might be interested in. This is deaconesses in presentation.
Mm-hmm.
They were right there from the beginning, but the first things they always did is what I do. You know, I'm a nurse, and this is what I do.
Mm-hmm. These were the papers that they would present at the conference.
Right.
Okay.
Or they also did some on topics, and the first topics were on hymnody, on teaching, on working with groups, youth, etc. There was one paper that I always laughed, an early one, which was called Deaconess Deportment and Qualifications. It goes way back in the 30s. They did lead Bible study. And it evolved eventually into becoming the keynoters and main presenters, which is what we see now. In the worship level, they started out doing nothing. Then they were allowed to have the devotions, which was the prayers said before and after each session. And then they were able to read and assist at the service. And finally they were able to preach and then preside. Well, that's the level that, but it started out as you couldn't do anything. I can't tell you that it was the year we decided to have it every day, but there was the idea of letting people know that it was ELCA or Missouri.
So that more communions were available then after that year. Okay. I just want to make sure I get that
Yeah.
right.
Now, you know.
Because I see that
we've
as
been
a way of
doing-
being adaptable.
And we've been doing communion every day now for so long that I can't remember when we didn't. But we used to have one communion service.
Right. And after that, that's when it was changed. So,
And it was usually the Sunday.
okay, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I can remember way back when, according to Missouri, you had to have a congregation sponsor the communion. We couldn't have communion on our own. And so we'd have to find the local congregation that was willing to say, yes, they would sponsor the communion we had.
Interesting.
Didn't have to be their pastor. It just had to be that they would say, yeah, we sponsor it.
All these church
I mean,
politics.
you know, sometimes I think the church can get caught up in so many rules and regulations that it forgets who it is. And I think one of the things that has been the overall piece for us as a diaconate is that we have tried to stay true to what it means to be diaconia. Doesn't mean it hasn't been bumpy.